Despite today's exchanges on independence, MSPs ultimately voted by a majority to mandate the First Minister to, as they put it, protect Scotland's relationship with the European Union. Nicola Sturgeon will travel to Brussels tomorrow to begin the process of seeking a solution. But if none is found, Scotland may well have to get ready for another referendum, this time on whether Scotland should leave the UK.
Well, joining me now are some MSPs who took part in that debate. From Dundee, Conservative MSP Murdo Fraser, and in Edinburgh, Labour's Lewis MacDonald, and for the SNP, Richard Lochhead. Welcome to all of you this evening. Richard Lochhead, the First Minister's off to Brussels tomorrow. I mean, it's clear from the standing ovation there was some warmth for Scotland's position there. But realistically, what can she achieve?
Well, as Parliament gave a mandate to the First Minister today to do, she's wanting to speak up for Scotland, because after last week's monumental result, with a situation where Scotland voted to stay in Europe because it's so important to our country's future, but elsewhere in the UK, of course, the result went leave, and now we face a very anxious time ahead. And it was really good, very encouraging to see the opposition parties, except the Conservatives, rallying round together to say that Scotland has to act. We give a mandate to our First Minister and the Scottish Government to go and find a route to maintain a relationship with Europe, because that's the democratic will of the Scottish people. At this stage, we have to look at all the options. That was what was discussed today at the Parliament. And we've been speaking, as you know, to other parts of the UK that voted to stay in Europe, like Northern Ireland and Gibraltar. And of course, we want to continue that dialogue, and we'll explore absolutely all options, because the outcome that most of the political parties in the Parliament want to see, reflecting the will of the Scottish people, is maintaining that relationship with Europe to protect our economy, our society, and it's the kind of country we want to be.
Well, Lewis MacDonald, you supported the First Minister in her request for a mandate to pursue talks. How far will your support go?
Well, what we asked the First Minister to do as a Parliament today was to go and explore all the options and to find out whether there was a route that would allow Scotland to maintain its relationship with the EU and our place in the single market. I think that's a very clear direction which she will take forward and report back to Parliament.
And if she comes back, having explored all the options and says that nothing short of independence will keep Scotland within the EU, would you then support a second independence referendum?
Well, Labour's position has never been to support that, but what we do want is to explore what options there might be. And clearly we need to take into consideration what the report back from that exploration is. But it would be a mistake, and the First Minister was very clear in her contribution in the Parliament, it would be a mistake to say that this was simply a ruse to set up an independence referendum. She was very clear that she was genuinely seeking other possible ways forward, and we encourage her to do that.
Well, Murdo Fraser, do you agree that it would be democratically unacceptable for Scotland to be taken out of the EU against its will?
What the vote last Thursday was about was whether the United Kingdom should remain part of the EU or not. And people in Scotland were voting on that proposition, not a proposition about Scotland alone. And you know, I've been deluged, even in the last few hours, my email inbox has had dozens of emails from constituents who voted Remain in the vote last Thursday, who are outraged that Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP are somehow taking that vote to Remain as a mandate for a second independence referendum, because they're making the position very clear that they are supporters of the United Kingdom. They voted for the UK to remain in the EU. They are, like me, disappointed in the outcome of that referendum, but they don't believe that gives the SNP a mandate to pursue a second independence referendum, or even for that matter these negotiations in Europe. This is an important point. You know, we all agree, and Ruth Davidson made this clear today, we want to deal with the EU, we want to keep access to the single market for British businesses and Scottish businesses, if at all possible. But that needs to be agreed on a UK-wide basis for the best deal for the UK.
So even if the First Minister comes back with an assurance that Scotland could remain in the EU if it was to vote for independence, you would stick with the rest of the UK out of Europe?
There is no mandate for another independence referendum. We've just been through two very divisive and bitter referendum campaigns, one last week on the membership of the EU, one 2 years ago on Scotland's place in the Union. The last thing people of Scotland need is another bitter and divisive referendum. And at a time when we're seeing instability in the economy and political instability in the UK, we don't need to add to that instability with yet another referendum on independence. We need cool heads and calm reflection.
Richard Lochhead, there's no mandate for a second independence referendum.
Well, Murdo seems to be ignoring the result of the referendum in Scotland, where overwhelmingly people in this country voted to stay in Europe. And Murdo is a member of Scotland's national parliament, because we're a country, we're a nation with our own national parliament. And people are looking to our national parliament to show leadership. And we're certainly getting no leadership from the UK parties in London, particularly the Conservative Party, who got us into this mess in the first place. And the people of Scotland want the Scottish Government and our national parliament and MSPs like Murdo and myself and Lewis to get Scotland out of this mess that the Conservative Government put us into in the first place. That's why we have a national parliament, to discuss national questions and represent the Scottish national interest. And in anyone's book, and I think the majority of people in Scotland agree with this is such a big issue for Scotland's future, is a material change in circumstances. And of course, that's what we've always said, that if there was to be another referendum in the future, and that turned out to be the only option for giving us a chance to stay in Europe, that of course is a material change of circumstances given the vote in Scotland.
Before we go, Lewis MacDonald, I'd just like to ask you just about the Labour Party before we go. Kezia Dugdale says it is difficult now for Jeremy Corbyn to continue as Labour leader. Do you think it's time for him to resign?
I think that difficulty is obvious. I think he will sleep on it. It is clearly a very difficult position for anyone to lead their party if their own immediate colleagues do not have confidence in them. I think the critical thing here, and we've been talking in the last few minutes about the position with Brexit, one of the possible outcomes of all of that is a general election across the UK. Clearly, Labour will want to be in a position to challenge the Tories, because it is the Tories who have created this mess. It is the Tories who are responsible for it. They need to be challenged. That, I think, is principally Labour's job. And I think Jeremy Corbyn and everybody else will have to think very seriously about how best we can do that.
There we must leave it, I'm afraid. Lewis MacDonald, Murdo Fraser, Richard Lochhead.